So welcome everybody to how to get hired with no experience. I'm really excited to do this topic because I hear this topic all the time from students and grads, and it absolutely deserves the attention that we're going to give it today. So to introduce myself briefly, welcome, hello, my name is Farrah, also known as the Grad Coach. For anyone that doesn't know me, 10 years ago exactly, I graduated with my theatre and performance degree, of all things, and I actually used that to break into a business management grad scheme at a Times Top 100 employer. Sounds maybe quite unusual, but I am living proof that you don't have to be limited by your degree title, and transferability is king when it comes to starting your career. During that grad scheme, I became a hiring manager. So I had to recruit over 200 students and grads into part-time and full-time roles. I also became their line manager, and I did that for around 5 years. But in 2021, I decided to retrain and relaunch myself as the grad coach, and the rest is history. I've now trained thousands of you brilliant students and grads at events like this. And I've also had the pleasure of personally coaching over 200 finalists and grads to launch dream careers across a myriad of sectors and role types at some of the places that you can see here in front of you. So today I'm going to be bringing both of my perspectives, ex-hiring manager at a Times Top 100 employer and my current career coach experience, to help you best navigate this idea of supposedly having no experience. So here's what we're going to cover today, folks. First, we're going to go through debunking this myth of no experience and challenge whether that statement is actually 100% true for you all. Second, we're going to look at how employers really assess entry-level talent. And then finally, we're going to do a light CV demo live, where I can show you practical examples of how everyday experiences can be translated into strong, relevant CV content. Anytime we have left over, we will use it for Q&A. And one thing that I would say is we've got two buttons here, folks. We've got the chat, which I'm going to be asking you questions as we go, and you can continue to share. And then we've got the Q&A button that we can use at the end. What I would say is hold on to your questions until the very end, because you might well find I've got a lot of great content here. Your question ends up being answered. So if it still hasn't been answered, we can absolutely come back to it at the end. But with that, let's jump into our first section. So before we get into anything practical today, I do want to tackle this belief that can hold so many students and grads back. Oh, sorry, I need to reshare my screen. I might have to do that a few times, folks. Apologies for that. And it's this very sentence, I don't have enough experience. I hear this constantly from first-year students, finalists, even graduates, months or even years after finishing uni. But here's the truth, almost anyone can convince themselves that they don't have enough experience, because there will always be more experience that you can get, another internship, another job, another project. So if your benchmark is perfect experience, you're going to always feel behind. But that doesn't mean that you don't have experience. You've all been living your life for what, 18 to 25 plus years now. You've studied, you've worked, you've collaborated with others, you've solved problems, you've taken on responsibilities. I promise you that is experience. So the more accurate way to frame this for today is not I don't have experience, it's I don't yet know how to position my experience. And that small shift is really powerful, because when you believe you have nothing, you stop trying, you stop looking for experience. But when you believe you have something, your job then becomes, well, how can I figure out how to explain it, to extract the gold, the strengths from it, and how to show the impact that it had. And that's exactly what we're going to start doing today. So now we've challenged this idea of do we or not have, enough experience. Let's talk about what people typically mean when they say experience, because I think we're all familiar with what I would call the gold standard of experience. Most students and grads, I think, let me know in the chat if you sort of resonate with this, but usually we mean things like full-time professional work, internships, placement years, some sort of paid role with some impressive employer. And there's usually a few unspoken rules behind this. People tend to think experience has to be paid. It has to be recent. It has to be with a reputable or recognizable employer. And ideally, it should match the job description perfectly for what you're going for. Now, of course, if you have these things, then fantastic. We must use them to the best of our ability. But if we're limiting ourselves to only that type of experience, almost nobody is going to be hired at entry level, because the reality is, as employers, and I know this from experience, we recognize you're at the beginning of your career. So instead, we want strong candidates to broaden what counts as experience and translate them into ways that we can understand and the ways will be valuable to us. So what I'm going to do is give you a few more examples of what could be very valid, but broadening out this concept of having more experience. So here we have a far more inclusive list, but it's not exhaustive, by the way. There could be so many more great examples. These are just the ones I regularly sort of coach candidates to use, and to great success. So firstly, I'm just going to give you about 15 seconds or so to have a read. And feel free to let me know in the chat if there are any that you definitely have, or ones that you're surprised even to see on this list. And then I'm going to run through a few of them as well. Okay, so let me highlight a couple. Firstly, degree, projects, and experience at the very top. If all you feel you have right now is your degree, please make the most of it. This is especially powerful for, I would say, technical or creative candidates. So I've worked with, for example, aspiring marketers, software engineers, even actual engineers, where we've strategically taken 4 or 5 of their strongest university projects and positioned them under a new section of their CV called industry relevant projects and experience. So instead of hiding all that brilliant work inside your very shortened education section, we give it the space it deserves to show your skills, your technical tools, and results as well that you've achieved. So that's one. The other one I want to highlight is society involvement. So in my own case, I was president of a fundraising society at uni where we ended up raising £500,000 for charity. And that became my evidence of how I could step into a business management grad scheme despite being a theatre grad. Now, am I saying you need to raise £500,000? Absolutely not. I am fully convinced I could have raised a tenth of that and it still would have been just as impressive. The most important thing is I was showing I could lead a team, I could negotiate with charities, I could plan events and basically be that kind of project manager for the whole year alongside my studies. So that's one thing, even if you're a member of a society, how can we leverage that to its full potential? And a final list of examples you'll see sort of towards the bottom, I would say are the really empowering ones. These are when you are creating experience, building an online personal brand, side hustles and passion projects, building a portfolio. So if you don't feel like you have enough examples yet, you can absolutely build them on your own steam. For example, aspiring UX, UI designers out there, you might want to build a website for a friend or a family member and include this in a portfolio. Aspiring marketers, you might create a mock campaign based on a sort of industry that you would love to market for, like an email campaign strategy, a TikTok and social media campaign, or any sort of content plan. You don't always need permission to start building evidence of your skills. So real food for thought there if you feel like it could resonate with you and the type of roles you want to go for. Now, one little extra that I want to add here to the mix, we're mostly thinking about CVs today, but a little caveat about interviews. There's another category of experiences that don't typically appear on a CV, but can be incredibly powerful at interview or even assessment centre. These are what I would call more personal experiences. You can see here things like family or caring responsibilities, being deeply involved in a community or a faith group. Sorry, let me reshare my screen again. Having a background as a migrant and having to relocate, at any age, doesn't have to be a young age, could be any age. You might assume that big employers don't care about these kind of stories, but actually you'd be surprised. I've worked with candidates who have used experiences like these in final stage interviews with organisations like Bloomberg, EasyJet, British Airways, and Mott MacDonald, to just name a few, and they've received glowing feedback. Why? Because it showed authenticity, their core values, and a strong storytelling skill. The one thing you have to make sure you do is you frame it as a victorious story rather than a victim story. So focusing on what did it build within you, what did you learn, and how did it positively shape you into the person and professional that you are today. So just a final thing there, when it's done well, these kind of stories are not only acceptable, but they can be the most memorable and incredible things that we end up hearing in an entire recruitment process. So maybe worth not trivializing them. Okay, so at this point, we've broadened our definition of what we can count as experience. So the next question is, well, how do employers actually evaluate that experience? And I think the easiest way to think about it for today is through this kind of three-step process: experience, skills, and results. So every experience that you've ever had, in theory, can be broken down into two key things. First, the skills that you've used or developed as a result. And then secondly, the results or impact that came off the back of it. And those are the two things, folks, that the employers at entry level really, really care about. Strengths or skills show your future potential. So they show what you're capable of bringing to the role in the near future, even if you've technically never done it before. And results show proof. They demonstrate that you can actually achieve things. So even if it's a random thing like sport or performing arts or a society, if you've achieved something in one arena, it's logical evidence that you can achieve something in their arena. But where most candidates struggle is that they stop at the experience stage. They describe, the job or the activity, but you never take that extra step to explain what strengths did this build in me. Oh, sorry, let me go back. And what impact did it have? So I'd love to hear in the chat as a little, pause at the moment. Tell me if you have an experience that you've had that you think might be more valuable than you realized after hearing this framework. If you can drop it in the chat, in like the chat section, not the Q&A section, I'd love to read a few and maybe even explore a few together. So let's see. All right, thank you so much, everybody, for sharing so much already. Okay, so thank you for kicking us off. So, Vasiliki, you're saying being a student voice leader. Yeah, that kind of sort of resident advisor, student ambassador can be really good for several things. We could think about, the number of people that you've had to support or advise or collaborate alongside. Often, yeah, that's sort of the customer service element, maybe even the safeguarding element for sort of residential advisor work. So yeah, really well done. Yes, great. And you're saying I have the data of the students and the outcomes. Yes, fantastic. Some more that we've got here. So thank you, Lucy. You're saying volunteering and 8 years of hospitality work. Yeah, chef's kiss. When I used to see that people had spent years in retail or hospitality, that was music to my ears for the role that I was hiring for, because we were looking for full-time assistant managers who had to come in, be very good with people, have a lot of sort of emotional intelligence and customer service skills. So years in retail hospitality, I know it doesn't always feel the nicest thing, but it really molds you. It gives you that time under tension, because you've probably, like most likely, Lucy, and so many of you in this call have spent thousands of hours speaking to people, and that matters. That context matters. Amazing. Feel free to keep sharing. Let's have a little think about how we can start translating this, because obviously it's one thing to think about this today, get creative and think, oh yeah, that's something I could use, but it's another to be able to then translate that. So let's have a look at the next section. The first thing I want to stress is the structure of your CV. So there are some golden opportunities on your CV that most people simply are not using properly. The first one is your education section. So too often I see it written as a singular line, just the degree, the university, and that's it. And I feel like we've been trained to almost always see the value as, well, what did you exactly study and at what university? But if your degree is even partially relevant to the roles that you're applying for, you really should consider fully unpacking it. So I'm going to go through an example in a second. But as you can see in the little demo here, we might unpack it in terms of key modules, in terms of major projects, maybe even your dissertation title, or just any notable academic achievements. Maybe you got a certain award, or you were in the top X% of a 100, 200, 300 person cohort for something. So the key question to ask yourself is, which parts of my degree demonstrate knowledge or skills that could be useful to this employer. So, for example, let's imagine that you are a law grad trying to move into HR. You might highlight some key modules like employment law, contract law, equality and discrimination law, corporate governance, ethics in business, like the list can go on and on and on. Or perhaps you completed a dissertation on something like diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, or sort of a case study of employees' rights or workplace policies, or like an infamous court case that went down about sort of employee rights. So suddenly your law degree isn't just a law degree, it becomes evidence that you could understand something like workplace regulation, employee relations, and just that kind of all that policy stuff that is directly relevant to HR. So that's the first section that I would really encourage almost everybody to think critically about. The second section is again for everybody in this room, because sometimes we do have a degree that feels a little bit random, but this next section is the bit I would encourage everybody to have. And this is having an industry relevant experience/project section. So this is where you can be a bit more flexible about what actually counts as experience. It doesn't have to be full-time work, it doesn't have to be paid, and it definitely doesn't have to come from a big employer. It could be the things we spoke about earlier, the personal projects, the side hustles, the volunteering, societies, anything else where you've built relevant skills for the role that you're going for. So, for example, I'll even take me, I guess. So if you're applying for a management grad scheme, like I was all those years ago, but many others you'll be doing it this year, and you were president of a society or even just a committee member, marketing manager, events manager, social sec, all those types of things. You've been in a leadership role where you've been managing people, planning projects, and coordinating things. We just need to frame it in that exact way on your CV to make it really stick and make it obvious. So these are two sections that I would strongly encourage you to maximize. Now, let's have a look at what examples could then even go into these sections. So number one is I'm going to take a standard, committee executive role at a society, maybe being your treasurer for your netball club. Now, the first thing that we're going to do before we dive into how we could take this everyday little excerpt of your CV and turn it into something very powerful, very memorable, I'd love to throw it out to the chat for a second. Looking at this original version on the left-hand side, what, if anything, feels undercooked to you? Or another way you might frame it is, does this look like your CV at the moment? And if so, maybe tell me a bit more about that. But I'd love to get your initial reaction when you read it, almost as if you are the hiring manager making a judgment about this person and their experience. So let's see what we've got in the chat. Okay, so Osiseri, you're saying you need to quantify your results. Yeah, okay, we're going to be talking about that. I'd be curious to know what you think, what results we actually could quantify for a role like a treasurer. So maybe put that in the chat, that would be great. Judy, hello, you're saying about expanding the points. Yeah, they are definitely on the shorter side. I think the most we've got there is about 6 or 7 words. So we can only judge it on the information that's been given. Okay, so a few of you saying as well about no evidence, no relation back to core skills. Okay, yeah, so you're right. It's almost as if it's just being framed as, well, that's just what I did. I was just a treasurer, nothing more, nothing less. But obviously, you'll see it in a second, when we are a treasurer, we are a finance manager. We're the person that's been elected to look over a budget, a group of people, and that's your core responsibility. So we could frame it in lots of different ways. You don't have to even keep the job title of treasurer. You could be a lot more flexible because again, it's not full-time work experience. So the title is a non-issue. You can change the job title to make it more relevant. Let's see if we've got anything else. Yes, good. Thank you, VJ. You're saying, sorry, Ankita, sorry, I think that's your first name. You're saying needs more specificity. So yeah, what sponsors, what specific work? Yeah, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. The key is if you can look at your CV right now and it has to generate more questions, like what society president, what club sponsors, what budget, what accounts, then that is a crucial sign that you are undercooking it, and we must add more context. So, without further ado, let's have a look at a fully transformed version. This is based heavily on multiple people that I've worked with that have got into some incredible places, corporate finance, big business grad schemes, and a whole host of things in the middle as well. So this is the exact same person, but with a whole lot more framing. So again, in the chat, I would love for you to take a second to read and then share anything that is standing out to you. What feels different compared to the original version? Any specifics? And any impacts as well. I mean, impacts on you. How does it make you feel when you read this version? How does it shape your perception of this person? Because they're the same person, but different framing, very different framing. Okay, so let's see what we've got. Hey, Alex, you're saying key skills used and the examples providing proof. Yeah, exactly. We're not just claiming that we have certain skills, we're giving a monetary amount, a percentage increase, or just like a numerical amount to the fact that you've got these things. For example, in the key skills, it says leadership and project management. Where's our proof? The fact that you've managed an annual budget, the fact that you've led a subcommittee team, many other things that I'm sure we could pick out. But yeah, we're connecting the pieces a lot more. Lovely. We're saying, Chirag, you're saying sounds great, demonstrating about learning that particular skill. Okay, yeah, lovely. Thank you. Helen, thank you. You're saying just more details, more results, more relevant responsibilities. Yeah, if we don't tell people, they will never, ever know. So we have to be good at becoming over communicators. It's never too much information for us when it's relevant and powerful. If anything, I'm desperate when I was a former hiring manager, not just CV, but interview, like, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. I want to know the exact nuance so that I can best ascertain and evaluate your potential to me. Okay, amazing. So, a few other things just to highlight as well that might be newer to you. We've got the key skills bullet at the end. Now, that's actually quite strategic because some of you might have heard of the concept of ATS technology, whereby big businesses, 90% of, big grad schemes, for example, are not vetting you initially by a human, almost just for now, consider it like AI. It's not quite AI, but it's a way to knock you out in an arbitrary, computer-based way. So we use the key skills bullet because what I would always advise is when you have powerful results-driven bullets, you don't then need to rewrite them necessarily. I see this all the time where people are rewriting bullets every single time based on the role. No, if they're results-driven, and we'll go through in a second what exact formula you should use, they don't really have to change, but the things that can change are the key skills, keywords, and phrases. Because sometimes, for one spec, the word leadership comes up on the ATS. For another one, it might be management or project management. So we can swap those in and make your life a little bit easier. So that's one detail. Another detail you're probably noticing is I'm a big fan of having a blurb where we can set the scene and give a context as to how valuable this experience is. So the fact that you got elected, the fact that it's a 120-person club, the fact that you're also collaborating with a team of 15 and you're also doing it during your second year of uni. Again, yes, we could maybe infer that by piecing together your CV and be like, well, I guess they're graduating next year and yeah, I guess they are multitasking. Never allow us to just infer that information. Explicitly tell us, and then we will see it and we will end up valuing it. So what I'm actually going to do now, folks, is I'm going to walk you through a 3-step process for writing killer bullet points every single time. So the first point is a powerful action verb. So words like managed, generated, reduced, coordinated. There's so many. You can Google them in a second. There's like hundreds that you could use. This immediately will make your language more assertive and it breeds a sense of authority. That way, your experiences are taken more seriously and their value is estimated appropriately. Now, am I saying that we go crazy and we put like really superfluous, whimsical language that you don't feel comfortable using? No. Hopefully, you feel quite at home with using managed, reduced, generated. They don't feel too buzzwordy. They feel actually quite relevant to what we're explaining. So that's a good, like, correct estimation. The second step is we're going to include a quantifiable result. And again, it comes back to what I said earlier. The question isn't, I haven't, have I got results? It's, I have them. How can I find them? It is your mission and your duty to always pull out the numerical amounts, the monetary amounts, and the percentages so that you can sell your value. So, for example, if you just told us, I manage a budget, cool, maybe sounds interesting. But if you told me you managed a budget of £20,000 for an 120 person team and while collaborating in a committee of 15, suddenly I take notice and I can understand the scale of the responsibility that you held, even if it felt easy, by the way. That's a really common thing I hear of like, but it wasn't that deep. Like I don't deserve to claim it in that way. But that's not true. Like, just because you thought it was easy or straightforward or yeah, everybody does it, it doesn't mean that you should undercook it to us as hiring managers. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We're the ones you're trying to impress. The final part is the strategy, aka how did you achieve that result? Usually skill wise or action wise, how did you achieve that? So for example, let's take the top bullet for a second. Managed a £20,000 annual budget. Great. How did you do that? By allocating funds across multiple projects and investments, leading a subcommittee team of 3 to execute monthly reconciliations, and monitoring team spending. Now, suddenly, we're hearing what we said earlier, right? The skills behind the results, planning, leadership, financial tracking, decision making. So when you put all these bullet points together and those 3 things, amazing things happen because it starts to not just sound like a student society role, and it becomes incredibly relevant to the things that you might be going for: finance roles, business roles, project management, operations. So action, verb, result, and strategy. If you follow that structure for, I'm going to say ideally 100% of your bullets, but as many as you can, you'll almost always produce an incredible CV. So let's have a look at one more example. And again, I really would love to get your thoughts in the chat now that you're getting a flavour of this. This is another very, very typical example. Classic, retail hospitality vibe, working as a barista at Starbucks. So before I show you the improved version, I'd love to hear in the chat, put yourself in the position of the hiring manager for a second. What skills or results might you predict that this person has developed or achieved in this role? Take your time, write as many ideas as you can in the chat, and we will, explore a few more. But what skills could they have developed? What results could they have achieved? I could see a few people having questions about some of the things that I mentioned earlier, like ATS. A question around what are your inputs for a person who had a gap year and a career change? Yeah, all great questions. We can come back to those a little bit later. Okay, thanks, Chirag. So you're saying customer service, teamwork, where are we now? Yeah, leadership, communication. Yes, fantastic. So then the next thing to think about is, so if I was good at customer service, what results might I have? If I was good at leadership, what results might I have? It's always that next step if you can. Brilliant. Seeing loads here. Building rapport with customers, leadership and mentorship. Yep, training new hires. Yes, you're going to see that in a second. Yeah, good work, Aria. Alex, yep. So attention to detail. Yeah, analytical skills. Yeah, the choice is yours in essence. It's really about, what do I know that I actually built? Because sometimes it can be, specific to you and that unique situation. I actually, interestingly, have a grad that I'm working with now who On paper, she had originally written barista at Nespresso. She worked at London Liverpool Street. When I then unpacked what actually had gone on in that store, it was mind-blowing. It turned out it was a test store, so they'd never had a live store before. They've just always sold products. So it was a flagship store that was basically treated like a startup. The CEO on a weekly basis would come in and would want sales reports, marketing reports, and she just stepped up and did it. And then she got recruited to then go into hotels and help her line manager sell some of the Nespresso products off the back of being a barista. So barista does not do her justice. She was effectively a sales and operations associate. So do you know what I mean? Sometimes context of what you uniquely did really, really matters. And do please lean into that if you feel like you have a unique story there. What we're going to do, folks, is let me reveal the version that we have for today. So here we have the transformed version. A few things I want to highlight. So again, same structure. We've got the powerful action verbs, delivered, promoted, contributed. Again, hopefully these don't feel too whimsical for you. They kind of make sense in the context of what we're saying, delivered service, promoted to a team leader, contributed to the training. So that's really key. Secondly, we have some beautiful quantifiable results. Even though it's a more, run-of-the-mill example, you can still have incredible results. So let me just share my screen once more. We've got things like serving 300 plus daily customers. Again, collaborating in a team of 15. That's quite a lot of people, in a fast-paced setting. Being promoted within 9 months of service, training 5 new hires. I'm not saying you've got to be the head of HR, but if you feel you contributed to it, that matters. That's you getting more responsibility and role modeling best practice in a company. So again, please don't, underestimate it. And then finally, we have our strategy. So how did we achieve those results? So instead of just saying delivered great customer service, we might say something like delivered excellent service to 300 plus daily customers by managing logistics of a 15-person team. That's not a stretch because they were a team lead. That's another thing we can unearth. They weren't just a barista, they actually had been promoted, so they had more responsibility. Communicating efficiently with customers while conducting myself in a personable manner. So great things there. The ability to work in a fast-paced environment with both customers and colleagues, leadership coming through, organisation efficiency coming through, great stuff. A few more, being promoted to team leader within 9 months of service by displaying leadership skills and a strong sense of responsibility towards store performance, including driving daily upselling and cost-saving initiatives. So again, it might be something as simple as there's like a monthly, lunch to go offer, and it's like, how many can we, like this specific mocha latte, like many can we sell? If you feel like you're someone where you're like, yeah, I'm up for that challenge, I'm going to sell as many as I can. I'm also going to encourage people around me to sell as many as I can. Claim it. Again, it's always a choice. You didn't have to do those things. You could have been an underperforming staff member, but you chose to go a different way. So it deserves to be on your CV, even in a micro sense. So there we are, folks. That is another way that we can take a simple cafe job and make it evidence of these great things that are transferable: teamwork, communication, leadership, working under pressure. And these are skills that employers will really, really value. So again, I'd love to know, now that we've looked through a few, what is an experience that you have that you are currently underestimating? I'm going to unshare my screen for a second and just focus on reading the chat. If there's any, by the way, that you're on the fence about, you're like, oh, kind of like, I hear what Farrah's saying, but I really don't know how it could be relevant, put it in the chat now, because I can then give you a bit more one-to-one support. But yeah, something in your experience, you've done it and you have been underestimating it. Share in the chat. Okay, so Chirag, thank you. You're saying in the university while pursuing some of the essential modules. Yeah, like if you've got a relevant degree or even partially relevant, we must think strategically of, okay, first, second, third year, what knowledge did I gain? What skill sets did I gain? What results did I achieve? It could just be as simple as, like I said earlier, you maybe got like a dissertation prize. So you were the top performing person out of, a cohort of 50 people. That says something about you. And you can explain, again, strategy. How did you achieve it? By, overperforming with your attention to detail, your critical analysis skills, other things that contributed, I'm sure, to you being the person who was the top performer. So yeah, that's great. Let me have a scan through. Also, Sarah, you're saying your dissertation as well. Yeah, I've had some really fascinating dissertations that have cropped up in my sessions with clients. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that is gold. You don't realize sometimes the research and the knowledge that you're sitting on for a particular industry or a particular employer. So yeah, have a think about it. It might not always apply, but have a think about it. Nishan, lovely. You're saying you've been a welcome buddy for 3 years. Imagine the amount of people that you've interacted with by now. And I'm sure there's some sort of metric there about like customer service delivery. Maybe there's 5-star reviews. Maybe there's a certain like satisfaction rating or completion rating of the little mentorship program that you do, something like that. That would be really cool to know. Brilliant. We've got some really nice ones. So Aria, you're saying producing a collaborative poetry collection with my youth advisory board. Oh, that's lovely. So again, I'm hearing project management, obviously creativity, but collaboration, working to tight deadlines, attention to detail. Obviously, once it's published, you can't take it back. That sounds really good. And then I would think as well in terms of results, think about the readership. So if it was like a university exercise, you could have had a readership of tens of thousands of people if it gets put on like the website of the university or maybe the newspaper of the uni. So the scale could actually be quite big, maybe bigger than what you're thinking in terms of your results. Brilliant. I'll do a few more before we move on. So Poonam, you're saying a sales assistant. Yeah, again, doesn't have to be the jazziest thing in the world that you're selling. It's the fact that you are selling. So many great skills there. Negotiation, rapport building, closing people, conflict resolution or like overcoming barriers, working at pace, working to targets even if it was more of a salesy type environment. Brilliant. Yeah, this is a nice one as well. We might have a few like more creative things. So Ankita, you're saying attempting to write novels. So I've had clients who are entering the creative world and they have industry relevant experience and they're putting that they're currently writing a novel. So they can say how many words they've currently written, what genre it is, whether they have sought any feedback on it so far. There's different things you can unpack, but just because it's not finished, it doesn't mean that you can't talk about it. I think it's about quantifying what you have progressed with so far. Really, really lovely ones. If we're a little bit low on the chat for Q&A, I'll maybe come back to a few more of these because these are really, really nice. But yeah, the most important thing I want to stress, and hopefully you are starting to click with this now, is the following. Sorry, it is not the best candidate that gets hired. Not the person with the most prestigious university on their CV, not the most perfect grades, so you don't have to be a first class or, top of your class, not the shiniest internships or placement years. It is always the best communicator. So if you're in the camp of you already have some of these more gold standard experiences, you still have a responsibility to communicate them well. Just because they're on there, it doesn't mean that you can skip this work. I still need to be convinced as the employer why it matters to me. And just one little thing I would say, it's a funny one when you leave uni. We put so much emphasis on grades and where we went to university. And then when we leave the academic world and enter the business world, so much of that falls away. I've done this again and again. I've repeatedly taken a 2-1 or even a 2-2 grad who had way more experience that mattered to me and they communicated it better than someone who just had a first class degree and seemingly nothing else because they didn't communicate it. And I was even hiring for an ed tech company. So we were actually looking for people who could teach English and maths. But it was more than that. It wasn't just about being a good teacher. It was about being a line manager, being a recruiter, being a business and project manager, so many things. So it is not the best candidate gets hired. It is always the best communicator. If you feel like you don't have those golden experiences yet, it is all to play for. It doesn't mean that your story ends there. You can, and hopefully from today, you will be learning how to translate almost anything you've done into something valuable to employers. So with that said, I think we'll move to live Q&A. If you could put into the Q&A section now, if there's anything that I haven't covered anything on the slides that you wanted a little bit more clarification, you are going to get the slides and you are going to get the recording. But please, if there's anything that you're like, oh, I didn't quite know what you meant when you said that on the slide, please let me know and I can explain more. But yes, let's see what else we have in the chat. Okay, so I'm just letting the Q&A come through. Let me just do a little circle around a few more of these experiences. So we've got here, thanks, Helen. You're saying digital marketing skills. I've been underselling myself because usually recruiters will ask for a specific campaign results. So you can do this. You know, if you wanted to build a kind of like mock experience in the sense of, I'm going to make content on my TikTok, you can make it a faceless page. You know, it doesn't even connect back to you, but it's your like portfolio account. You can then use the back end of it. You can look at impressions, you can look at engagement, you can look at, you know, all the things that we can track social media with. I think there will always be a way that you can do it for a mock experience. So food for thought there. Let's see what else we've got. Okay, a few of you saying about leadership. I led a few committees. If you are sitting on leadership experience and not using it, oh my, you're missing a trick. It's absolutely golden. And I don't mean leadership in terms of presidency necessarily. It can be you're the marketing exec, the events exec. The point is you've been hired or elected or chosen, or you've nominated yourself and they've accepted you, whatever, to be in that level of responsibility. So yeah, and I think for anyone, by the way, that's at uni now and you're thinking forward to what you could achieve at uni, hopefully this is giving you some ideas of like, oh, if I could use my time strategically, I could join a committee, I could join a society, I could work on my passion project or my side hustle when I've got the luxury of time. I know it doesn't always feel that way at uni, and sometimes you can be really, really busy, but I just mean time in terms of you've got time before you graduate. So think forward about what you could create as experience off the back of today, perhaps. Lucy, you're saying your dissertation, I managed a year-long project independently. Wow, okay. Organize interviews with participants, handle data, and you got a 92%. That's like beyond publishable. Yeah, that's so good. Really, really well done. I have a client that was very similar for both her bachelor's and her master's, and it was to do with like consumer behavior, and she wants to be a marketer. We spoke about how she was the only person to get that grade for years at her certain uni. Like we figured it out, and it was like no one had ever had that high score in 10 years. So like talk about that. That's important context. But yeah, even in terms of quantifying the number of people you interviewed, how long the process was, like really breaking down what does that mean when you say you led the project, like who, what were the like sprints of it, what were the seasons of it, like yeah, that context would be really, really good. Okay, let me just check to see if we've got any questions. We do. I'm gonna pivot to the questions, folks. So let me go through. So the first one was, for writing a cover letter, what are the essential points that need to be taken under consideration? So great question. I hope one day I can come back and do a whole masterclass on this as well. But in essence, the things that people get wrong with cover letters are they're too long, they're too you-centric, and they're just not strategic enough. And I'm going to go through what I mean by all of them. Number one, too long. You're not writing the great American novel. Max 500 words, but I would say 350 to 500 words all in. Secondly, they're too you-centric. So I correct this all the time when I read cover letters. You frame it around, I did this at university, I had this role, I had this experience. Oh, and here's why it matters to you. Flip it the other way. You want your cover letters to be them-centric. So I understand that you're looking for these top 3 skills. Let me tell you where I've done them step by step. Or I know that your company is known for these core values, this mission, these key projects. Here's why I'd be a great fit for you. Can you all just hear and feel how different that would land for the hiring manager? Because you're putting them at the center, not yourself. And I know it might feel counterintuitive because it's like, well, I want to sell myself, but you sell them through the lens of beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Why does it matter to me? That's the question you're constantly getting them to answer. Why does it matter to me? The role I'm hiring for, the company I belong to, why does it matter? If you can translate that, it's game changing. And then lastly, strategic. So way too many paragraphs that don't have a function. So you need to have, in all my best practice, 4 paragraphs. Quick intro, quick outro. In the middle, emotional argument. So that's answering the question, why do you want to work here over any other company or role? Then the logical argument, why should they hire you out of any other candidate? If you answer those, they don't really have many more questions. They might, go with a different candidate, but if you do that at scale, most of the time, employers are going to be very, very impressed. But that's a nutshell. I wish I could give so much more, but that hopefully has given you a few things to be thinking about. Aria, hello, you're saying in interviews, if employers ask why you've got experience across different fields, implying that you're not focused, how to communicate it positively to them. That's really interesting. I'm wondering if you've had a negative experience, like a negative singular experience where somebody said that, because I definitely don't think it's representative of the masses with hiring managers. I think what is really important, it depends how far you are into your career. If you're a fresh student, I really don't think it matters. It's about talking about the things you have done in terms of the skills and the results. If you're a little bit more into your career, maybe you've worked for 1 to 2 years, I think this is when it really pays off to have the industry relevant section for your CV. I know you said about interviews, but I find it interesting that you've had that interview because the whole point is you pick the best example for the question at hand. So I would never want you just to arbitrarily think, well, I'm going for a marketing role. Every single example I give has to be marketing. Not really, because if they're saying, tell me when you've led a team, maybe you've got a little university project where you led like a group of 3 on a marketing campaign, but then you've also been president of a society where you've had like thousands of people with members and a huge team. And like, I know which one I'd rather hear. So I wouldn't be biased to the industry or the context. I'd be biased towards what sells my skills the best and what were the best results I got off the back of the skills. If they're asking for communication, pick the best example where you've got the best results about your communication skills. So yeah, like I honestly, maybe feel free to add more context in the Q&A, but don't worry about that. Like I wonder if it's more about your storytelling and the way you're explaining it and structuring it, because even if it's a different type of experience, if it's not clearly laid out, we'll just struggle to follow it. So it might be more of a delivery problem rather than a topic problem, if that makes sense. So food for thought. Let me see what other questions we have. Oh, they've all come through now. So I'm going to try and vary it so I've got maybe one from everybody and then maybe go back round. Motahari, you're saying, I'm struggling to land a role in my sector, which is environmental, geography, civil engineering, after graduating with my master's. My industry is very niche and I've been rejected from a lot of grad schemes. Okay, I'm not sure if applying to very non-relevant roles is wise, since I don't want to be out of employment for too long. So I guess my question, sorry, I guess my question is, do you want to be in your sector? Do you want to be an engineer? If so, we must double down and we've got to make the most of your bachelor's and your master's. You must be sitting on so many great experiences, but I'm seeing a couple of big names where they're probably using ATS. It might just be that you've not got enough keywords and phrases. So even if we know that you're a great candidate, logically on paper, you're not passing the threshold, and so you get auto rejected. So that's the first thing. If you are thinking, oh, I'd be quite interested in pivoting a little bit outside of my immediate suitability, let's say, then that's a different story. And you can absolutely sell that you've done, one type of engineering for the world of tech or for a different type of engineering. I mentioned Mott MacDonald earlier, right? I had a client that went the other way around. So they did computer science at uni and they've just, 9 months ago been hired as a electrical engineer at Mott MacDonald. And we used his degree, but also a few other things like portfolio things to sell where he's done the most, let's say, hardware friendly technical projects to sort of align himself to electrical engineering. But actually, there was a lot of crossover between tech and electrical engineering anyway for this role. So it is possible, but it does depend on what you would want. I hope that's helped. Krishna, I think I'm seeing yours. So you're saying, what are your inputs for a person, who has taken a gap year and opted for a career change? So again, it really depends on you, sort of what role you're looking for. The thing with when I shared my industry relevant experience, I might even just share my screen one more time just so you can see. Again, I reiterated earlier that let me restart it, I have to go back through. it doesn't have to be recent experience. So industry relevant work experience, if you've done things at uni, beyond uni, before your gap year, you can just use them. And the thing I didn't get a chance to mention is that in the CV structure, the order in which you should go is, again, I wish I had more time to fully explain, but a personal statement at the top, then your education, if it's partially or fully relevant, and then industry relevant experience. So the beauty of that is that we're putting on page 1 of your CV, or as early as possible in your CV, the stuff that is relevant. So we don't have to go by the chronology of, oh yeah, but I did that 4 years ago. Doesn't matter. If it's a great piece of experience and it fits, then let's put it there. So the industry relevant experience, that still goes in chronological order, but it does, the whole thing doesn't have to be in chronological order, if that makes sense. So yeah, like you can either not mention the gap year or the time away. You might have a couple of roles that you did, or side hustles even that you did while you were traveling. And again, if it can be sold well, we can then include it. But yeah, I had a client that went traveling for 5 years, or like then stayed in Australia for a significant time period. We actually did highlight some of the roles that she'd had as like a claims officer and like various hospitality things. And she was able to be hired in the civil service, which was her dream employer for her. So I think sometimes we can have a huge concern around, oh my God, I've got this huge gap on my CV. I've been told that really, really matters. Not really at a graduate level, I'll be fully honest. We don't really care about that because by proxy of you being a student or grad, there's going to be gaps. And we recognise that in 2026, there's more to the story here. There's COVID, there's gaps perhaps between your bachelor's and your master's, there's just general adversity. I've known a ton of people with years of gaps on their CV through job hunting or personal issues or anything. And again, if we don't sort of put too much focus on it, then it doesn't have to be seen as this wholly negative thing. So yeah, there are my thoughts. We have another 6 minutes, so I'll keep going with questions. Sia, I'm really sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. You said, I got a distinction for most of my modules. Fantastic, congratulations. But due to extenuating circumstances, I will most likely fail and need to submit my dissertation. Just trying to figure that out. Did you mean in your degree, most of your modules you got that, but your dissertation was you got a failed subject? How do I frame my EC and having to extend my studies professionally? I mean, honestly, like number one, you're probably not going to be job hunting at the moment because you're going to be still studying. So it's kind of to an extent like a slightly later problem unless you're going for grad schemes. And then by that point, you would have done your dissertation again and hopefully then passed it. So do they need to know that you failed it the first time round? No, to be honest. Like you might want to put the dates of, 2021 to 2025, and they might ask themselves, sorry, like or 2022 to 2026. And they might ask themselves, oh, like why is it 4 years rather than 3? But I don't really think it has to be sort of explained. You don't have to justify yourself. If it comes up, you can share transparently maybe why things happened. I've known grads where there's very, very real reasons why they had to get an extension. And actually, it's been used in a way to really shape them and humanize themselves. And again, it's that victorious story, not the victim story, but the victorious story. So maybe I would say don't get too far ahead of yourself yet. You've probably had, some tough things going on. So be kind to yourself. Let things take their natural course. Let you complete your dissertation, get your degree, and then see where you land by that point. But really, it could easily just be not said. You don't have to even include that you've got a dissertation. So you can just cut that altogether. So there's lots of different ways that you can explore it. Poonam, you're saying when qualifying experience, how do we generate or measure the numerical values? Aha, so I presume you mean in the context of like, I don't quite know what quantifiables exist. So great question. You must find out. So I know that seems like a bit of a, I don't know, like a cheap answer, but there will be stats. You just have to make it your mission. So it's often through anecdotal memory. There's nothing wrong with putting a stat down on your CV that we don't know is 100% perfect, accurate, but it's within the ballpark of what is true. I am not saying for any second that you should lie, that you should overextend yourself or exaggerate, not at all. What I'm saying is if you can think back, like for example, maybe you were a society president, you're like, you know what? we had a great year. Like we grew our membership really significantly. And I can sort of remember that when I started, we had 50 members, and by the end of the year, we had 90 members. Like that's a good ballpark. That feels real, that feels true and genuine. So then you can figure it out. That would be a what, 80% increase in membership. So try to really take yourself back there. And maybe there's people that you could ask, like fellow colleagues or friends who's like, oh yeah, when we did that together, like, what do you remember the stats to be? Or maybe even an ex-line manager. But honestly, I think the easiest route is just take your mind back and just be at peace with like, okay, I think this feels right. I'm not overdoing it, but I'm not underdoing it by putting no stats. That's the problem. If we get too worried about, oh, but I don't know the exact number, the exact monetary amount, and therefore I'm not going to put anything, you are only shortchanging yourself, because the reality, unfortunately, is that there are going to be people who do lie on their CV, who do over exaggerate. And I'm not saying go to their level, but I'm saying you have to find a way to compete and still have your integrity. So you have to find a way, and there is a way. I've never worked with someone and never not found them together. So you can do it, I promise you. Just takes a little bit more thinking, but you can do it. Let me see if there's one very quick question, and maybe from someone that I've not heard from today. But yeah, so many questions. Thank you. Let me just put on the screen, by the way. Don't forget that we've got all of my contact details. So it's been really, really wonderful to spend this time together. Don't hesitate to connect with me. Check out all my links. You've got my social media and you've got my stand store there. So a ton of information there if you want to, check back in with myself or get a bit more information. But yeah, let me just see if there's one more quick question. Just quickly, Michaela. I finished my master's in August and have been applying since then. Is this a big gap? No, it is not a big gap. It's perfectly reasonable. You've just done your master's and then you've had a hot minute doing other bits and pieces. Do not fear this. Even if it was objectively a little bit longer, a year, 2 years, it does not matter. Again, it's not about being a perfect candidate on paper. It's about being a good communicator. So you could always find a way to explain what you were doing in that time, or just don't even disclose it. Like sometimes we just don't need to over explain things. We can just put forward what is valuable information in and of itself. So hopefully that's a good point to end. Thank you so much, everybody. There's been so many questions. I'm so, so grateful for all the engagement. So thank you. I sincerely hope this has been a wonderful starting point to unlock your experience and recognize you have so much more to offer than you think you do. Please stay in touch. Obviously, you've got my social media. You'll get the slides and bits and pieces. But yeah, go forth and work on your communication skills. They will get you incredibly far, not just in your career, but really in all aspects of life. So very exciting when you invest in your communication skills. Thank you, everybody. We will leave it there for now. Take care, everybody.